Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So one of the biggest questions we had as first-time cruisers was whether or not we should do a transfer and airfare with the cruise line, or if we should just arrange that ourselves. What's cheaper? What's easier? And we thought, what better way to figure that out than to just do it ourselves and see. We are here at the Munich airport. We're actually hopping over to London and then taking a trip down to Southampton to get on the Norwegian Prima. This cruise will take us to Amsterdam and then up to a few places in Norway and then over to Iceland. So we're covering a lot of ground and we're really looking forward to it, especially going on the Norwegian Prima, which is one of NCL's newest ships. Now, if you know anything about the Southampton port and the port at Reykjavik, is that they're very far away from the airport. So instead of trying to figure out the trains and buses ourselves, we thought we would just arrange air with NCL and then take their transfers. So let's see how this goes. We made our way to the airport with our tickets in hand. NCL sent us all of our ticket information via email at the time we booked the transfers. They also had all of the information related to the transfers between the airport and ports in our tickets for the cruise. Since we were flying from Germany, we flew with Lufthansa. NCL sent us a booking number so we could add the flight directly to our Lufthansa apps. Now, we were paying for this cruise transfer program, but sometimes cruise lines offer transfers as part of the cruise fare. If you get a deal like this, you need to be aware that you're much more likely to be put on a budget airline from an airport that might not be as convenient to you. You also have a high chance of taking flights with layovers, since these are the cheapest tickets for the cruise lines to purchase. After all, it's a free benefit for you. Now, Lufthansa is definitely not a budget airline, and we were able to fly direct from our home airport in Munich. But remember, we did have to pay for that privilege. NCL wasn't subsidizing any of our transfers. We will have all of the exact costs and compare those to what we would have paid if we booked on our own at the end of this video. Since we could add this flight to our booking app, we were also able to select our own seats, which was really nice. Depending on the airline you fly with and the fare that the cruise line books for you, this might not be possible. Our flight was actually very enjoyable, and it was pretty much the exact same experience we would have had if we booked it ourselves. One thing that made us a bit nervous was that we flew the day that our cruise was departing. Normally, if we're going to a different country, we'd want to fly into our destination at least a day ahead of time. This way we could relax, knowing that we would get to the terminal the next day on time. With NCL, they book your flight the day of your departure if your home country is close enough to the departure port. In Germany, we had to fly the day of our cruise, because we were just leaving from Southampton, which is a 2-hour flight away. If you're flying from the US or Canada to a port in Europe, you can probably extend your departure date by a day or two. Luckily, our flights were on time. If we did arrive late, the cruise line would have provided us with transportation to the next port, since they were the ones who essentially booked all of our travel. That is one nice thing about booking travel with a cruise line. When we arrived in the airport, we had to find the NCL transfer desk, but we had some issues in passport control holding us up for another 45 minutes. So we made it to the airport after a fairly hectic bout with passport control, but we're here waiting for our luggage, and we'll see what the transfer looks like on the other side. They're supposed to be waiting at baggage claim with a sign, but that's pretty much all I've heard. I haven't gotten any texts or anything about the transfer, so we'll see what we get. It was easy to find where we needed to go. In fact, NCL had a desk right outside a baggage claim, but now came an extremely long wait for the next bus to the port. This was our first experience in waiting, and the first time where we felt like maybe we made a mistake by booking a transfer through the cruise line. Oh, we found where we needed to go, but just waiting. Been here for 45 minutes, maybe?
Has it really been that long?
Yeah. Hopefully soon, though. Finally, about an hour after we arrived in the waiting area and about 2 hours after arriving in the airport, we were able to board our transfer bus. We had to walk about 15 minutes to the bus area of the terminal, which was a surprise as well, and if you're not very mobile, this could be an issue. Now we experienced our second disappointment of the transfer. We had to stop with our bus at every terminal at Heathrow Airport. We spent about 30 minutes just driving around the airport before we even got on the road to the cruise port. After about another hour and a half, we arrived in the Southampton Cruise Terminal. Well, we made it.
We're here?
We're here. We haven't gone through security yet or checked in yet, but we're here. Yeah, we're just getting bag tags and then we can go. Now, we set sail. But let's fast forward to the end of our journey where we see what the transfer and flight home from Reykjavik was like. This is the worst part of the cruise. Yeah. Debarkation. Yeah. Actually, the worst part is packing the luggage, but you guys didn't get to see that fun stuff.
Yeah, we saved you.
Yeah.
That trauma.
So our luggage should be waiting for us down there, and then we get on our transfer. At the end of every NCL cruise, an information sheet will be sent out about when you have to depart the ship, and people with transfers get their own designated departure times, depending on your scheduled flight time. We did have to talk with guest services about this. Our flight was at 1:55 p.m., which put us in the bucket of guests that would have to get off the ship by 7:15 a.m. This bucket was for people with flights between noon and 2 p.m. Since we were in the back end of that bucket, we were able to talk guest services into letting us leave about an hour later, by 8:15 a.m. Now, this brought about our next disappointment in the cruise transfer program. We would be waiting in the airport for a very long time. Normally after we get off of a cruise, even if we have a flight scheduled that day, we would like to go out into the town and get some breakfast or lunch. We take our time getting to the airport because there's no point in getting there 5 hours early. However, with the transfer, you need to board the bus directly off the ship. And the transfers were so incredibly early. We were struggling to figure out what we would do in the airport for the next 5 hours. We couldn't imagine what it would have been like if a flight was leaving at 6 or 7 p.m., and some of them were. We took the bus to the airport, and again it was a very comfortable ride. The driver and assistant helped with all of the luggage, and we were dropped off right at the front door. But our fears were realized when we walked in, because the check-in desk for Lufthansa didn't open for another 3 hours. That meant that not only were we stuck at the airport, but we were stuck on the land side of the airport, which has nothing but a little coffee shop. We spent a lot of time trying to find a spot because, again, the airport was extremely busy, and sometimes we were even sitting on the ground. Once again, though, our flight home was just fine. So what did we think about this transfer program with Norwegian Cruise Lines? Here's some of the pros. For one, we didn't have to deal with the stresses of booking our own travel and figuring out the best way to get to and from the port. Our second pro is that even if our flights and transfers arrived late and we missed the ship, there wouldn't be any additional cost to us. Because we booked the transfer with the cruise line would need to get us to the next port. The third pro is that the transfers were actually very comfortable. The buses were new and nice, and our flights were actually very enjoyable. Lastly, we didn't have to pay directly when we booked the travel. If you purchase an airline ticket, you have to charge your credit card immediately when you buy the ticket. However, since we booked with the cruise line, it was just included in our cruise fare, so we could pay for it in installments with our cruise fare payments. If you want to spread out the cost of the trip, this would be a good way to do it. Now that we've gotten the good parts out of the way, let's talk about the bad. Our biggest disappointment was all the waiting time. Because of how these transfers worked, we just sat waiting for about 2 hours in London and about 3 hours in Reykjavik, over and above how long we would have had to wait for transportation if we booked our own travel. Another con was that we had no control over our travel plans. We had to take the flight that the cruise line assigned to us. We also weren't able to experience the departure and arrival ports. For example, if we booked our own travel, we probably would have flown into London a day or two earlier. Because we booked a transfer, we couldn't do that. We had to fly in the day our cruise departed. So we had no time in London or Reykjavik before or after the cruise. If you are flying transatlantic, there is more leeway in when you can book your flight because you're flying from such a long distance, so you might not have this issue. Now, another big con for us, the biggest actually, is the price. That's right, the cost of booking transfers was so much higher than it would have cost to book our own travel. Now, this might seem like a no-brainer, but let's break it down to see where these costs are actually coming from. First, we can talk through the flight. In order to understand how much it costs to book through NCL, we have to understand the fare classes. On Lufthansa and many other airlines, there's a light economy ticket, which is generally non-refundable and non-rebookable, and then there's a classic ticket, which is rebookable for a fee and allows checked baggage, and then there's flexible fares, which are refundable. Normally we would book the classic ticket, just so we could have a travel credit if things get canceled, and we get baggage. The cruise line will always book the flexible tickets, so that if your flight gets canceled, they can get a refund. This is the case even though if you want to cancel your tickets, the cruise line will not reimburse you. On Lufthansa, this alone cost us an extra €40 per person per flight. And then of course, there's a small upcharge. If we booked the flight on our own, the total ticket price round trip per person would have been €428. We were charged €618 per person. Now we come to the transfers. We were charged €243 per person for all of the transfers for this trip. So this covers our transfers from London Heathrow to Southampton, as well as the bus from Reykjavik Port to Keflavik Airport. If we booked ourselves, we probably would have taken a National Express bus and followed the exact same route as our transfer did. This bus ticket would cost about £22, or €26 per person, so $52 overall. In Reykjavik, we could also book our own bus to the airport. Taxis would be a bit more expensive, but booking a ticket on Flybus Iceland from the cruise terminal building, that's right, directly from the cruise terminal to the airport, would only cost us about €36 per person. This would mean that when all is said and done, if we had booked our own travel, we would have spent about €981 versus the €1,723 we spent on NCL transfers. This is a huge discrepancy. Even if we booked private transfers in private cars at the times of our choice, we would still have saved about €500 overall booking ourselves. This is our biggest sticking point. The price was extremely exorbitant. It might make sense to take a transfer if you can find a great deal with your cruise line, or if the transfer is included. After all, then you won't be paying anything. But make sure you do your research ahead of time to ensure that you're actually getting a deal. For us, there are very few instances in which the transfer program for NCL would ever be worth it. It was way too much to pay for the little extra peace of mind that we got. Hopefully this video helped to shed some light on the NCL transfer program and our experience with their transfers. Of course, your experience might be different, and it really depends on where you're going. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one!